Investigators' attempt to detain President Yoon was halted this afternoon following hours of an intense standoff with the presidential security team. The 8-member Constitutional Court bench today wrapped up its preparatory hearings and announced 5 trial sessions starting January 14th for the high-stakes decision on whether or not to remove the president from office. A travel ban has been placed on the CEO of Jeju Air as part of investigations into the worst aviation disaster on South Korean soil. Police have also raided Busan International Airport and the airline's office. It's January 3rd, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. A tense drama unfolded at the president's residential compound earlier today between his security team and law enforcement officials seeking his arrest over the controversial martial law declaration. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts our coverage.
The first ever attempt to detain a sitting president was halted after a 5-hour standoff between investigators and the Presidential Security Service that included some physical confrontations. On Friday at 8 a.m., staff from the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials attempted to execute the arrest warrant at the presidential residence. However, they called off the attempt after 5 hours as they found it impossible to carry out the arrest due to the Presidential Security Service's refusal to comply with their requests, and there were concerns over the safety of the investigators on the scene. The CIO, on leaving the site, issued a statement saying, "We express serious regret over the behavior of the suspect who refused to comply with legally set procedures." According to police who supported the warrant execution process, the Presidential Security Service, citing the Presidential Security Act, wouldn't allow further access into the residential area around 200 meters from the house. The CIO also told reporters that there were around 200 PSS agents and military personnel that created a human wall, while there were only 20 CIO agents and 80 police officers to execute the secondary search warrant. With the failed first attempt, the joint investigation team made up of CIO staff and police said they have opened a case against PSS chief Park Jong-jun for possible obstruction of the performance of official duties and summoned him for questioning on Saturday. Meanwhile, the legal team of President Yoon repeated that the warrant was illegally issued and thus was not valid. It added that the CIO, which does not have the authority to investigate insurrection charges utilizing police officers to gain access into a security zone, was illegal. The warrant is valid until next Monday, and more attempts to detain President Yoon could be made. For now, the CIO is yet to reveal what its next move will be in attempting to execute the warrant. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, that confrontation between the presidential security personnel and the team assigned with his arrests has been drawing large crowds of President Yoon's supporters and opposers alike to the neighborhood. Our reporter Lee Eun-hee is on site. Eun-hee, what's it like there at the moment?
Yes, Jung-min, I've been here since noon near the presidential residence in Hannam-dong, Yongsan-gu District, Central Seoul, where the atmosphere of the rally remains intense. It's been over 6 hours since the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials suspended its operation at around 1:30 p.m., having been unable to execute an arrest warrant against President Yoon Suk-yeol. In response, President Yoon's supporters cheered and reaffirmed their commitment to continue the rally overnight, occupying the sidewalks and extending on to parts of the road right near the presidential residence. The rough estimation of the number of participants increased from around 600 at 7 a.m. this morning to approximately over 10,000 by 1:50 p.m. Some of Yoon's supporters had even stayed overnight to keep watch. Similar to yesterday's scene, many are voicing strong criticism of the CIO, arguing that President Yoon's declaration of martial law is lawful and insisting that it is the main opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung who should be arrested instead. Meanwhile, those opposing the president have also been holding rallies and marches calling for his impeachment and demanding his arrest. Korea's largest labor organization, the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, launched a two-day protest demanding President Yoon's arrest. Today's rally began near Hangangjin Station at 3 p.m., which is nearby, and the protesters later marched closer to a spot near the presidential residence to continue their rally. They're currently located right behind me, singing together and making speeches. They're now positioned a bit farther down the road from where the opposing group is holding their rally.
Were there any clashes, and what is in place to ensure safety?
Yes, Jungmin, as expected, I've seen several heated exchanges between police officers and protesters. Other than that, at around 6 p.m. near this area, I've heard police officers asking the protesters of the labor organizations to gather on one side of the road for safety and traffic control. That is because as the KCTO protests calling for the president's arrest moved towards the presidential residence, they occupied both sides of the roads. However, now a citizen rally with more civil society groups joining, which started at around 7 p.m., is currently taking place on one side of the sidewalk and partially on the road under police supervision. From time to time, I can hear the police taking control of the scene through their loudspeakers. Although the two opposing rallies are being held in separate locations, the police are actively managing the areas in anticipation of potential clashes. To answer your other question about the safety measures implemented for today's rallies, 45 riot police units, each consisting of 60 officers, along with approximately 2,700 police officers, were deployed near the presidential residence. Additionally, over 130 riot police buses were stationed at the scene, and traffic around the presidential residence along Hannam-daero is partially restricted. The police buses deployed by the CIO have now been removed, and vehicle restrictions in certain areas have been lifted. However, the arrest warrant is valid until next Monday, January 6th, meaning the CIO could resume efforts at any time, possibly over the weekend. We can likely expect both small and large protests to continue for a while. That's all I have for now, Jungmin.
That was our Ian here reporting live from the president's residential neighborhood. A second pre-trial hearing took place at the Constitutional Court this afternoon. For details, our correspondent Woo Soo-young is standing by live at the venue. Soo-young, I hear today's session stretched on quite a bit amid some tense words between the two sides.
Good evening, Tongmin. Yes, that's right. So we expected the hearing to last around 40 minutes like last time, and also during the preparatory hearing for former President Park Geun-hye for her impeachment. But today's session lasted around 1 hour and 20 minutes because of these very heated exchanges. And while President Yoon team, they contested the grounds suggested by the National Assembly's impeachment panel, saying that they're based on media reports and mere opinions, also accusing the media of being hostile to the president. They also contested the National Assembly's decision not to include insurrection charges as one of the grounds for impeachment, saying that it was fundamentally inconsistent with Parliament's resolution to impeach the president. Now, when one of the presiding justices pointed out that Yoon's team had not even offered a basic stance on first, why the martial law was ordered, and also why troops were sent into the National Assembly, Yoon's lawyers said it is simply impossible to offer a basic opinion, and that as much as the nation's leader faces impeachment, the proceeding must be taken all the more seriously. Now here, the National Assembly's representatives accused Yoon's team of delaying tactics, which of course the team denied, and they said that they've been strenuously preparing for the trial. However, as Yoon's legal team walked into the court for the hearing, attorney Bae Jin-an appeared to suggest that they will continue to contest the proceedings.
Without a proper evidence review, merely because a few constitutional court justices are nearing retirement, the process is being rushed. I won't use the term hasty, but if this process concludes that quickly, it defies common sense.
Despite the trade of tough words, the hearing itself, though, ended inconclusively.
That's right. So once again, the court tried to outline the main grounds for President Yoon's impeachment trial, as well as draw up a list of evidence and also witnesses that the two sides would like to present throughout the trial. However, the grounds for impeachment were not finalized. I mean, last time, the National Assembly's impeachment panel, they called for the declaration of martial law, the proclamation of martial law rules, the lockdown and disruption of Parliament, and fourth, the search and seizure of the National Election Commission as the main grounds. Today, they said they would like to add Yoon's alleged order to detain judicial figures, including former Chief Justice Kim Myung-soo, as a separate ground for impeachment. Otherwise, the two justices assigned to the case only got as far as confirming and partially selecting evidence and witnesses, mostly presented by the National Assembly side, of course. President Yoon's side did not submit a list of witnesses and asked for more time to prepare their evidence plan for the trial proceedings until the next preparatory hearing. However, the court decided not to schedule another trial preparatory hearing. They're going to go straight into the trial sessions beginning on January 14th at 2 p.m. and the second session 2 days later. Excluding the Lunar New Year holiday at the end of January, the court plans to hold hearings around twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays until February 4th.
Now, you touched upon this during your coverage yesterday, So-young. So we are looking ahead to some tangible advances in legal proceedings then, given the presence of 8 justices at the court now.
That's right. So as of New Year's Day, we have 8 justices at the Constitutional Court. Now, of course, that's one short of a full 9-member panel, but it is the same number as when former President Park Geun-hye was impeached in 2017. Now, if we refer to legal experts and their opinions, they widely believe that the court will decide on President Yoon's impeachment before April 18th. Now, that's when senior justices Moon Young-bae and Lee Mi-sun are set to retire, and the court is likely to issue a ruling before another vacancy complicates the process. Now, if we refer to past trials, the court held hearings 2 to 3 times a week for President Park Geun-hye, with 3 preparatory hearings and 17 trial hearings in total. However, the timeline for Yoon's proceedings, of course, largely depends on his team's cooperation with the court. If Yoon's defense requests dozens of witnesses or raises procedural objections, then the trial could face delays.
All right, thanks for the coverage, So-young. Keep us posted. Amid mounting political uncertainty here in Korea and the upcoming leadership change in the U.S., the allies are trying to make sure that their cooperation remains solid. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has this report.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to make his farewell trip to South Korea before the Biden administration ends later this month. South Korea's foreign ministry announced Friday that he will hold a meeting with his South Korean counterpart, Cho Tae-yeol, on Monday. The upcoming meeting is expected to act as an opportunity to publicly show that the two countries' alliance remains strong, despite the political turmoil from the brief imposition of martial law on December 3rd. Blinken previously said that South Korea has shown the strength of its democratic institutions after the country's parliament voted to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol.
Look, I think the most important thing is that the Republic of Korea has demonstrated its democratic resilience. We've seen it follow peacefully a process laid out in its constitution.
With only around 2 weeks left before he leaves office, the top American diplomat is also expected to reaffirm trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, a key diplomatic achievement made during the Biden administration. Blinken will reportedly visit Japan after wrapping up his trip to Korea. His visit comes as Seoul and Washington recently agreed to resume the diplomatic interactions that had been put off because of the political fallout.
Our expectation is that the critical mechanisms in the U.S. Our K relationship will remain in place, and we believe that a meeting schedule is important.
Separately, as South Korea continues its efforts to restore credibility following the martial law, acting President Choi Sang-mok met with the American ambassador to Seoul, Philip Goldberg, and U.S. Forces Korea Commander Xavier Brunson on Friday, and discussed plans regarding the launch of the new U.S. administration. Choi vowed to push forward with diplomatic and security policies based on a strong alliance, and call for active cooperation. The two American officials also reaffirmed Washington's support for South Korea, as well as its commitment to defending the country. 배은지, Arirang News.
In other news, a travel ban has been issued against Jeju Air CEO Kim Il-bae as part of investigations into Sunday's plane crash at Muan International Airport. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The investigation into the tragic Jeju Air passenger plane crash that killed 179 people continues as police issued a travel ban on a person believed to be a key figure in the investigation. The Jeonnam Provincial Police Agency issued the ban on Jeju Air CEO Kim Il-bae as it investigates charges of occupational negligence resulting in death. Jeonnam Police also raided Muan International Airport as well as the office of Jeju Air. The search and seizure operation was conducted at the Jeju Air office in Seoul and the Muan office of the Busan Regional Office of Aviation. Authorities are securing evidence regarding the location of the airport's localizers and the communication record between the pilot and the control tower shortly before the crash.
Airport facilities are managed by the airport, and the Aviation Administration branch office is also clearly involved in matters like air traffic control and other areas. So of course we have to look at them all. This is in order to secure records and documents related to aircraft operations, maintenance and facilities.
The Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport has also begun an on-site inspection of air navigation safety facilities, including the position of the localizers, which is at the center of controversy in the Jeju Air crash. The inspection will be conducted across all airports nationwide. Investigators have also been able to secure the audio files from the cockpit voice recorder of the ill-fated aircraft. The CVR contains conversations between the pilots, communications with the air traffic control, as well as warning sounds inside the cockpit. With the bodies of victims being returned to the bereaved families, funerals and burials are still taking place. With many of the victims' families still at the airport, authorities have also begun returning items and belongings. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on a promising note as we start this new year, over 242,000 babies were born last year, marking Korea's first annual increase in 9 years. Lee Yoon-jin has details.
For the first time since 2015, the number of births recorded in South Korea in a year has surpassed the previous year's figure. In 2023, there were 235,039 births recorded, and according to data released by the Ministry of Interior and Safety on Friday, in 2024, that figure rose by 3.1% to 242,334. Of the new babies born in 2024, 123,900 are boys and 118,300 are girls. Meanwhile, the number of deaths also increased in 2024. Compared to the figure recorded in 2023, there were 6,800 more deaths, coming to 36,700 in 2024. This brought the country's population to 51,217,200 registered residents at the end of 2024, marking a decreasing trend for the fifth consecutive year. The biggest portion of the population in 2024 was people in their 50s at 17%. Followed by those in their 60s making up 15.27%, while the smallest portion was children under 10 years old at 6.13%. Lee Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Time now for our weekly arts and culture segment. That means we have our culture correspondent, Song Yujin in the studio. Welcome, Yujin.
Good evening, Jungmin.
What do you have for us today?
So, Jungmin, as you know, today is the first arts and culture of this year, so I prepared a preview of some of the major pop culture events to look forward to in 2025. Let's first take a look.
If you're curious about some of the K-culture events and content coming up this year, this is your guide. Starting with K-pop, several big names will be back in the spotlight. The long wait for BTS fans is almost over.
With all members set to complete their military service by June, I think BTS-related topics will once again be heavily in the spotlight this year.
And Blackpink is ready to be in your area once again. YG Entertainment's chief producer Yang Hyun-seok confirmed last July that new music and a world tour are on the way. Meanwhile, a new generation of stars is ready to shine. 3 of the big 4 K-pop agencies, JYP, SM, and YG, are planning to debut new groups this year. JYP will kick things off with the debut of its 7-member boy group, Kickflip, this month. SM is gearing up to introduce its first girl group in 5 years following aespa, while YG will also unveil its new group, which chief producer Yang calls the next monster. Turning to cinema, 2 of Korea's most celebrated directors are making their much-anticipated returns.
Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, which explores the world of cloned humans, and Park Chan-wook's latest film, No Other Choice, are in the lineup. There's excitement about how these works from master directors will shape and inspire new cultural trends.
Bong's sci-fi film Mickey 17, starring Robert Pattinson and Steven Yeun, will hit North American theaters on March 7th with its Korean release earlier that month. Meanwhile, Park's new thriller No Other Choice, featuring Lee Byung-hun and Son Ye-jin, is keeping its release date under wraps. Streaming platforms are also ready for some major releases. Squid Game fans won't have to wait long for the next installment. Following the recent release of Season 2, the Netflix original will conclude with its 3rd and final season as early as this summer.
I shot the Season 2 and 3 at the same time, continuously. So I'm now working on the post of Season 3. It's almost done. We're working on the music and CGI right now.
The streaming giant is also bringing back another favorite. Its 2024 hit Culinary Class Wars will return with a 2nd season in the latter half of the year, promising more intense and thrilling cooking competitions. From music to film and streaming, that was your 2025 Culture Preview.
No doubt 2025 will be a big year for K-culture. Yujin, are there any other events we should keep an eye on?
Absolutely. So I want to start with Korean literature, as it has been drawing great attention, especially after Korean author Han Gang won last year's Nobel Prize in Literature. So a lot of readers around the world are waiting for Han's next novel, which she did mention during her press conference with the Korean media last month during Nobel Week in Stockholm. So during the press conference, Han said that she'll start working on the last part of her Snow trilogy once she returns to Korea. Now, while it's unclear when Han will release this book, another Korean novelist, Hwang Seok-young, will treat us to his new novel this year. And this will be his first since Mater 210 in 2020, which was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize last year. And over in classical music, Im Myun-chan, who made history last year as the first Korean pianist to win the Gramophone Award, will be the artist in residence at the 2025 Tongyang International Music Festival this March. And also, another star pianist, Cho Sung-jin, is planning a nationwide tour from June to July. Both will also perform at New York's Carnegie Hall, Cho in February and Im in April.
And as our culture correspondent, what kind of year do you hope 2025 will be for culture?
Well, one of the experts I spoke with, he said something that really resonated with me. So if I may, I'd like to share that. So I think you'll know this really well, but 2024 was a year of uncertainty, politically, economically, and socially. And especially during times like these, culture has the power to bring people together, fostering unity and also empathy. So I hope that in 2025, Korean culture can play a more meaningful role on the global stage, contributing to understanding and also connection in the international community.
Can't agree more. Thanks, Eugene, for the report, and I look forward to many more arts and culture segments this year.
Thank you.
Cold wave advisories have been in effect for the northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and inland areas of Gangwon-do province. This morning, Paju in Gyeonggi-do province was as cold as minus 12 degrees Celsius. This cold spell will continue throughout the country tomorrow. The air is drying up around areas on the East Coast. In particular, a dry weather warning is in place for eastern parts of Gangwon-do province, and a dry weather advisory is also issued for the coastal areas of the Gyeongsang-do province and Seongnam in Gyeonggi-do province. In some areas such as Ulsan and the surrounding Gyeongsang-do provinces, it has been dry for around 30 days. Please be careful not to cause any fire accidents. The first weekend of the new year will start off at minus 5 degrees Celsius in Seoul and Gyeongju. Daily highs will move up to 4 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 7 degrees. Heavy snow is expected in the central parts of the country on Sunday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69번 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece, saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
Welcome to the MC Special 2024 Recap. Please show us the first quiz. What? Wow. Oh. Are you excited to find out what's coming up? Yeah! Don't go anywhere.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. With the arrival of the new year 2025, many laws and regulations are being updated. Today, we will take a closer look at the changes in systems that are closely related to daily life. One of which is a series of measures to support and raise the country's chronic low birth rate. In today's discussion, we'll explore the key factors contributing to South Korea's declining birth rate and the impact of the new policies. We'll also discuss how advancements in AI technology, like the push for digital textbooks, are reshaping the educational landscape, as well as how social media platforms are adapting to protect young users. For more on this, we invite Woo Hae-young, professor of sociology and director of the Institute of Asian Studies at Portland State University. Welcome, Professor Woo.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Kim Jo-eun, assistant professor at the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. Great to have you, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start with Professor Woo. So most of us are aware that South Korea's low birth rate has long been a pressing issue here. Could you tell us what are the main factors contributing to this societal problem, and how do experts view its long-term implications for the society?
Well, I like to say, well, there are a lot of factors, but I like to just point out three main factors. One is just less and fewer marriages, older marriages. So a lot of people, they tend to get married at older ages, and some people just end up not getting married. So that's one of the factors. And also the second factor I like to say is just such a high cost of raising children in Korea. So educational, we all know that, the private education investment for children has been really, really high, and it has been increasing in recent years. So the third factor that I like to point out is non-friendly work environment in South Korea. So for example, like work hours are often not flexible, and working from home is not widely accepted. And also a number of hours worked in Korea is higher than most industrialized countries. So, and moreover, although there are some like work-family policies in place, it is often not feasible option for a lot of people, especially for those who work in smaller workplaces. And also, even if it is feasible, even if it is available to utilize, but then its utilization is dominantly by women workers and leading to increased like gender gap in labor outcomes. So, so those three things that I like to say as main factors for those low birth rate in South Korea. And the most important implication of the low birth rate is population aging, clearly. And actually, it is projected that with the current levels of birth rate, and Korea will be the oldest country in less than 2 decades. So with the increase of old population, we are going to see a slow economic growth, and also substantial increases of societal expenses to care for older populations.
Right. So with a lot of factors that Professor Woo have mentioned, we're going to dig into the details as we speak. So to tackle these kinds of problems, the government has announced it will raise its financial support by raising the amount of the so-called First Encounter voucher, which provides $1,356 for the first child and more for every subsequent child. And additionally, parents will also receive a child allowance of $68 per child for up to 11 months and a monthly child support payment of $68 per child until the child turns 95 months old. Professor Kim, having said this, how do you think will these new policies impact South Korean families? And do you think they're enough to encourage a higher birth rate?
So when it comes to monetary incentives, current research show that monetary incentives like the First Encounter voucher have limited impact in boosting fertility rates in very low fertility contexts such as South Korea. So while these financial supports are valuable, particularly for low-income families managing basic needs for childcare, they do not address the fundamental sources that deter young people from marrying and having children. So the primary barriers to marriage and childbearing in Korea aren't so much about the short-term expenses, but rather long-term economic instability and inability to accumulate assets.
So young people view childbearing as a lifetime commitment requiring substantial financial, time, and emotional resources throughout a children's development. The proposed voucher and allowances, which only cover up to 11 months or up to a few years, do not alleviate these long-term concerns. And this policy might help existing parents managing their immediate childcare burdens and support children's early development. However, they're unlikely to significantly influence the decision to have children among those people who are hesitant about making this life-changing commitment. So more fundamentally, these policies do not address several critical factors contributing to South Korea's low fertility rates. As Professor Wu mentioned, the core issues include labor market, working long hours, and labor market insecurity, high housing costs, relationship instability, work-family conflict, and ongoing gender debates, and all these things is not really addressed within this policy scheme. So to effectively address the fertility crisis in Korea, policies need to tackle these deeper structural issues rather than focusing solely on short-term financial support.
Right, so fundamental causes must be addressed directly. Now, one of the major causes that both Professor Kim and Professor Wu mentioned is the choice between work and child rearing. And employees often hesitate to apply for parental leave because they're concerned about the employer's reaction, of course. And to address this, a new colleague support fund of $136 has been introduced to give incentives to employees who take on additional duties when a colleague goes on a parental leave. Professor Kim, what about this? Do you think this could help resolve the problem? And alongside this, what other measures would you suggest?
So first of all, it's encouraging to see the government shifting their focus to address workplace culture rather than just focusing on individual solutions for working mothers as they did it in the past. However, I have some concerns about whether this compensation alone will be effective. Again, you see the fundamental issues in Korean workplace is the culture of long working hours and inflexible work arrangements. And these problems run much deeper than what additional workforce can address. So while 136 USD might seem helpful, it may not be meaningful to offset the stress of managing additional responsibility in an already demanding work environment. I'm also worried about potential unintended consequences. When someone takes parental leave, then companies are expected to hire additional workforce to replace the vacancy. And however, then their colleagues often need to spend more time to train temporary replacements while managing their own work-heavy loads. And this training period could actually create more stress, and even with the additional compensation. So another question is how effective these temporary replacements and arrangements would be for companies to remain untested. And if you were asking me about alternative solutions, I believe we need to focus on transforming, again, workplace culture itself directly. Companies need to implement genuinely flexible working arrangements where employees can adjust their working hours and as well as location based on their needs. The goal should be creating an environment where taking parental leave is viewed as a normal part of one's career path, not an exceptional burden on colleagues. That's what will make a real difference in the long term.
Right, so staying with the shift on the cultural part, given South Korea's unique cultural context, Professor Wu, what about you? What are some societal shifts that need to happen to support these kinds of policy changes?
So I agree with what Professor Kim was arguing here, because work environment in South Korea is such a unique compared to other industrialized countries. So and then like she mentioned, and also I mentioned earlier, and people in Korea spend more hours at work, and then also despite such high levels of educational attainment among women, and then their improved relative social status compared to the past. And many people in Korea still believe that women are more responsible for child rearing, which is kind of interesting. And that's also a unique cultural aspect in South Korea. So in order to have some of the social shift to, overturn such a low birth rate at this point, and I do think that, we should make some changes. And then those changes should be at multiple levels in various domains. But then if you're thinking about like facilitating the shift, I think the parental leave, the work-family policy is really important. And Dr. Kim also mentioned parental leave. And I do believe that parental leave should be for both women and men. But then so far, I mean, at this point, so we have seen some of the, evidence that men, the proportion of the men, fathers, they take parental leave has been increasing. But then it's just still really, really small number compared to women. So both the parents, both the working parents should be able to take the paid parental leave. And then, there should be some cultural changes too. And then the parenting is really responsible for both mother and father and men and women and both the parents. And then they should be, and also what she mentioned, and I would like to also echo that work environment should be also more family friendly by reducing work hours and also supporting like flexible work arrangement. And that's the key so that the working parents can afford to raising children. So those shifts may take a really long time because you've got to be able to take those like opportunity to take advantage of the paid work family policy. And then you got to make the perception and you got to change the perception. And then that's how you can actually change your behaviors. And those behaviors and perceptions are going to be just spread. And those processes take really time. So I would argue that, it is really important to have those like policies in a consistent manner for a long time. It's not going to be just one-time thing. And so we got to just have them in place and then make sure that we have like consistent policy in place. And then so that people can actually change their perception and therefore their behaviors.
Right, so a consistent policy is necessary given that we have observed this conservative culture for decades now already. Now, Professor Kim, what have other countries facing similar demographic challenges done that South Korea could learn from, particularly in Europe or Asia?
For me personally, I tend to be cautious about the learning from other countries approach. While it's tempting to look at successful policies elsewhere, we need to recognize that each country has its own unique institutional, cultural, and labor market conditions that significantly shape policy outcomes. So, for example, we often take examples of Scandinavian countries, which has progressive welfare systems, egalitarian gender norms, and relatively high fertility rates. And their success is deeply rooted in specific population compositions and labor market conditions that differ significantly from Korean context. So trying to transplant their policies without considering these differences could potentially create unintended negative consequences. So examples could include the daddy quota policy, which mandate working fathers to take certain amount of leave during their child rearing period, which was implemented in Sweden and Switzerland, and then they were widely celebrated for improving maternal employment as well as fertility rates. However, research from Spain and South Korea shows a surprising opposite effect. So fathers who took parental leave actually reported lower intentions to have another children. So this counterintuitive result stems from how these leaves often increase burden on women's employment and heighten men's awareness of the cost of childbearing. In Korean context, where we have both intensive parenting norms requiring deep parental involvement in children's development and demanding work environment, simply copying such policies might actually increase parental stress rather than reduce it. That's why I believe our focus should be understanding and addressing South Korea's specific challenges rather than trying to import solutions from elsewhere. And then the solutions is, we mentioned with Professor Wu, the workplace culture, and then to try to balance work-life work-life balance and other things.
Right. Thank you for highlighting the important parts of our discussion. Now we step ahead to another attempt that's going to happen from this year. South Korea's ambition plan to pioneer the nationwide adoption of artificial intelligence-based digital textbooks has hit a roadblock, actually, as the National Assembly passed an amended bill making the books supplementary instead. Professor Wu, how do you think this change will affect the consistency and uniformity of of educational standards across different schools in Korea? And what kind of impact might this have on policy effectiveness?
Yeah, I think that's really important to think about. So it's not really like mandatory like adoption, right? So it is a supplemental. So that means that I think that, existing discrepancy in terms of like access to technology, like available resources and student educational outcome are likely to increase because it's going to be up to the principal. Having said that, I'm not necessarily thinking that, AI-based educational textbooks should be adopted in a standardized way, because I don't believe that we have sufficient evidence for how well AI-based educational textbook and instructions effectively serve the purpose as it's intended. But what I think is needed now is that we should invest some time understanding like various educational needs for students. And then in addition to like developing the AI-based educational material and training teachers, in that way, I think we can create more effective like learning environment for students.
And also in many parts of the world, the digital divide is a pressing issue, particularly for families with limited access to technology. Professor Kim, how could South Korea address potential social disparities in the adoption of AI-based learning tools?
So as you mentioned, digital divide is a pressing issue globally, but in terms of basic access to digital devices, South Korea has achieved near universal coverages. As far as I know, statistics suggest that over 99% of the household have the internet access or access to mobile devices, so spanning all age groups and social classes. So the traditional digital divide of access isn't our primary concern in my perspectives. However, when we talk about AI-based learning tools, we are facing a different kind of divide. One is digital literacy, and another thing is knowing about effective utilization of these digital technologies. So the gap often aligns with socioeconomic differences, of course, where some families might have better understanding and ability to leverage AI tools for educational achievement. And I would like to share some observation about current initiatives that you mentioned, the Ministry of Education's the promotion of AI digital tools in schools. While it sounds very promising, my careful examination of this program reveals a significant limitation. These are essentially the just digitalized version of traditional textbook accessible via tablets. So the AI component is largely missing. We're seeing a basic digital conversion rather than true AI integration. So I would like to suggest a different approach. Rather than focusing solely on device distribution or digital textbook access, we need to fundamentally rethink how we teach AI literacy. So this means first we should focus on teaching the concept of AI and application of AI across all socioeconomic groups. It can be done with traditional paper textbook. And then second, we need to emphasize understanding how AI can enhance learning and productivity. And finally, we should ensure teachers across all schools are properly trained AI tools and literacy. This would help prevent the potential emergence of a new kind of digital divide based on the quality of AI education rather than just access to technology.
Right, so teaching them how to make use of the latest technology instead of just the digital device is very important. Now, meanwhile, another change. As for teenagers, Instagram has introduced a teen account function for South Korea, which turns many privacy settings on by default for users under 18. Teen accounts will limit unwanted contact and sensitive content, such as violent and sexually explicit materials for their users. Professor Kim, could you give us some background behind the change?
I mean, the background is quite obvious. The initiatives emerge from growing concern about youth safety on social media, because teenagers and young adults are among the world's most active social media users. And this policy is especially significant given the vulnerability of young people during their critical development period. And there's numerous research showing that exposure to this unfiltered content can significantly shape their worldview, social attitudes, and mental health, which could have long-term consequences even in their later life. So that is the background for these changes.
Then, Professor Wu, we hear that this teenage accounts have been already being used in the U.S. since September last year. Could you give us some details on how effective was this?
Well, I believe such interventions are welcomed and well intended, so it's clearly, it's right directions. However, those changes cannot be just solutions to protect our children from being exposed to inappropriate content and creating unhealthy relationships on social media platforms. So instead, and also I don't believe that we have a really good evidence to kind of suggest how we can whether and also how much, to what extent those teen accounts have been really efficient or effective to protect our children on that circumstances. So I do think that those regulations are really in the right directions, but thinking that those regulations should be really serving as an opportunity to encourage conversations between parents and children. So ultimately, we would like to see that teen account should be just one of the many ways to establish a bit more appropriate environment for our children to utilize social media.
Right, so we'll look forward to more of these positive changes in the near future. Professor Kim and Professor Wu will have to leave our discussion right here tonight. Thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.